Jake Morrison stood in the center of the great crystal chamber and felt the weight of 47 alien species watching him. The walls of the Galactic Council building rose high above his head like a cathedral made of living light. Each surface reflected the faces of creatures that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others floated in tanks of glowing gas. A few looked almost human except for the extra arms or the silver eyes that never blinked. The Vorthak Chancellor stepped forward on 6 insect legs. His voice came from speakers built into the chamber walls because no human throat could make the sounds his kind used to speak. Ambassador Morrison of the human species. The translation echoed through the air. You stand before this council to hear the final judgment on your people. Jake kept his face calm even though his heart was beating fast. Behind him sat Captain Alex Turner and Commander Sophie Blake. They had flown here on the human ship Meridian to represent Earth and all the human colonies scattered across council space. 200 worlds, 12 billion people, all waiting to hear if they would be allowed to stay in the only home they had ever known among the stars. The Chancellor's multiple eyes focused on Jake with the cold attention of a predator. Your species has violated the sacred laws of galactic harmony. You have built machines we did not approve. You have explored systems we marked as forbidden. You have changed things that were meant to stay the same forever. Dr. Lisa Park shifted in her seat behind Jake. She was the scientist who had figured out how Vorthak shields worked by taking apart a broken one they found on an old battlefield. The council called it stealing. Lisa called it learning. That difference in thinking was why they were all here today. The humans have shown a dangerous pattern, spoke the Etherian delegate. The energy being's words came as pure thought pressed into their minds. They do not accept the boundaries we have set. They ask questions that should not be asked. They seek answers that should remain hidden. Jake remembered the day engineer Ryan Collins had built the first human hyperdrive that could jump twice as far as any council ship. The council had demanded he destroy the plans and never build another. Ryan had refused. He said knowledge belonged to everyone and should not be locked away by rules made by creatures who were afraid of tomorrow. Your colonies have spread beyond the zones we assigned to you, continued the Chancellor. You have built cities on worlds we said must remain empty. You have turned dead rocks into gardens without asking our permission. That was true. Humans had a gift for making life grow in places where it had never existed before. They could not help themselves. When they saw a barren world, they wanted to plant trees and build homes and fill the silence with the laughter of children. The council saw this as a crime against the natural order. Humans saw it as hope. The trial had lasted for 3 days. Witness after witness had spoken against humanity. The crystalline hive complained that human miners worked too fast and disturbed their meditation schedules. The Aquatic Federation said human ships made too much noise when they flew through space. The Silicon Lords accused humans of being too emotional and too unpredictable to be trusted with important decisions. Only a few species had spoken in favor of humanity. The Centauri remembered how human doctors had saved their homeworld from a plague. The free traders liked how humans always paid their debts and never cheated in business deals. But their voices were too few and too quiet to change anything. Most serious of all, the Chancellor said, and his voice grew darker. Your scientists have been experimenting with technologies that threaten the stability of our ancient order. Dr. Elena Martinez has been studying quantum biology in ways that could reshape life itself. Commander Tony Williams has been testing faster-than-light communications that could upset the careful balance of power between species. Jake thought about Elena's work. She had discovered that living things could exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. Her research could cure diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millions of years. But the council was afraid that changing one thing might change everything. They preferred a galaxy where people suffered and died rather than risk the unknown. The holographic seal above their heads began to glow. It showed a human hand shaking an alien claw surrounded by stars. For 50 years that symbol had meant that humanity belonged in the galactic community. Jake watched the light grow brighter and knew it was about to disappear forever. The Galactic Council has reached its decision, the Chancellor announced. The human species is hereby expelled from our organization. All human vessels must withdraw beyond the outer rim within 60 standard cycles. Any human presence in council space after this deadline will be considered an act of war. The seal dissolved into sparks of light that faded to nothing. Jake felt something break inside his chest, but he did not let it show on his face. Sophie Blake made a small sound behind him like someone trying not to cry. Alex Turner's hand moved to his weapon before he remembered where they were, and forced it back to his side. 60 days, Jake said quietly. You're giving us 60 days to evacuate 200 colonies. The Council has spoken, the Etherian delegate replied. Your species has proven it cannot live by our laws. Therefore it cannot live among us. Jake looked around the chamber one last time. He memorized the faces of the creatures who had just sentenced his entire species to exile. Some looked sad, others looked relieved. Most looked like they were already forgetting that humans had ever existed. Then we'll leave, Jake said. His voice carried to every corner of the great chamber. But don't expect us to disappear. Humans have a talent for surviving in places where no one else wants to go. Maybe that's exactly what we need to do. The Chancellor's multiple eyes clicked as they focused on him. The outer rim is empty space, Ambassador. There is nothing there but void and death. Jake smiled for the first time since the trial began. That's what you said about our homeworld when you first found us. You called Earth a worthless rock orbiting a boring star. We turned it into something beautiful. Maybe we'll do the same thing out there in the void. As they walked out of the chamber, Jake could feel the galaxy changing around them. In the deep darkness between stars, ancient sensors were detecting the political upheaval. Machine minds that had slept for millions of years were beginning to wake up. The Council had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history, but they would not understand that until it was too late to fix it. 5 years had passed since the great ships carried humanity away from Council space. Dr. Elena Martinez knelt beside a crystal formation on the planet, Heaven's Edge, and watched purple light dance through its surface. The rock was warm to the touch and hummed with energy that made her teeth ache. Nobody in the Galactic Council had wanted the void sectors, because they thought the strange crystals were just pretty decorations left behind by some dead civilization. They were wrong about everything. Elena carefully extracted a piece of crystal no bigger than her thumb and placed it in her scanner. The readings made her smile. This single fragment could power the entire research station for 6 months. Back in Council space, energy was expensive and carefully rationed. Here in the darkness between stars, humans had found enough power to light up half the galaxy. Another breakthrough, Doc? Asked her assistant. A young man named Carl who had volunteered to spend his life studying rocks on a world that barely had an atmosphere. Better than that, Elena said. I think we just solved the energy crisis for the next 1,000 years. The colony ship New Boston hung in orbit above them like a metal moon. It had been one of the first vessels to reach the void sectors after the Exodus. Captain Jenny Walsh had chosen this system because it was as far from Council space as her navigation computers could calculate. She wanted to make sure no alien patrol would accidentally find them and remember that humans were supposed to stay forgotten, Admiral. Kate Harrison floated in zero gravity inside the command center of the orbital station above New Pittsburgh. Through the transparent wall, she could see dozens of shipyards where human engineers were building vessels, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Council had rules about ship design that went back 10,000 years. Every vessel had to look and function in specific ways that kept the balance of power stable between species. Humans no longer cared about those rules. Show me the test results for the new destroyer class, Kate said to the holographic display that appeared in front of her. The image showed a ship that looked like it was made from liquid metal. Its hull could shift shape during combat to deflect incoming fire. The engines used a new type of fuel that Kate's scientist had discovered by accident while trying to make food taste better. Most importantly, the weapon systems could adapt to any enemy they faced by learning from each attack. The Ghost Protocol is working perfectly, reported Engineer Susan Gray from her station near the reactor core. Our ships can phase between dimensions for up to 30 minutes at a time. Enemy sensors can't track what doesn't exist in their reality. Kate nodded and pulled up the next report. Dr. Peter Kim had been working on something he called reverse polarity shields. Instead of bouncing energy attacks away from a ship, his new defensive system absorbed the power and sent it back at whoever fired first. The harder an enemy hit, the harder they got hit in return. Ma'am, said Lieutenant Bobby Chen from the communications station, we're getting reports from the archaeology team on Kronos 7. Dr. Maria Santos says she's found something big, Kate. Switched the main display to show the frozen wasteland where Maria's team had been digging for months. The planet had been dead for longer than human civilization had existed, but deep below the ice they had found ruins that defied explanation. Whoever built them had technology that made the Council's most advanced systems look like stone tools. "Put me through to Dr. Santos," Kate ordered. Maria's face appeared on screen with ice crystals in her hair and excitement in her eyes. "Admiral, you need to see this. We found a control room that's still active after 50,000 years. The symbols on the walls look almost human, but that's impossible because humans weren't even in space when this place was built." "What kind of technology are we looking at?" Kate asked. "I don't know how to explain it," Maria said. "The computers here respond to human brain patterns like they were designed for us specifically. When I touched the main console, it activated systems that have been dormant since before Earth had complex life. It's like this place was waiting for us to find it." Meanwhile, in the outer colonies, humans were learning that exile had unexpected benefits. Without the Council's trade restrictions, they could deal directly with independent species who had been excluded from galactic politics for centuries. The nomad fleets brought rare metals in exchange for human-grown food. The deep void miners traded exotic matter for human entertainment programs. Commander Rachel Torres stood on the bridge of the merchant vessel Golden Dawn and watched a nomad trading post-dock with their cargo bay. The aliens looked like walking crystals with too many arms, but they paid fair prices and never tried to cheat anyone. More importantly, they brought news from the inner galaxy. "The Council is having problems," the nomad captain told Rachel, through a translation device that turned his crystal chimes into human words. "The Draconian Empire and the Centauri Federation are fighting again. Trade routes are being disrupted. Several worlds have stopped paying their taxes to the central government." Rachel was not surprised. The Council had maintained peace by making everyone dependent on their trade networks and military protection. With humans gone, there was no one left who could innovate solutions to new problems. The aliens had forgotten how to adapt because they had spent too long following rules instead of thinking for themselves. "There's something else," the nomad captain continued. "Our deep space sensors are picking up strange signals from the galactic core. Something is moving out there. Something big." That night, Rachel sent an encrypted message to Admiral Harrison. The report included everything the nomads had told her plus data from human sensor nets scattered throughout the void sectors. Long-range scanners were detecting massive energy signatures that had been dormant for millions of years. Kate read the report 3 times before she understood what it meant. The ancient machines that had destroyed the civilization on Kronos VII were waking up. Whatever had triggered their original rampage was happening again. And this time the galaxy had no idea what was coming. She looked out at the human fleet that had grown from nothing to become the most advanced military force in known space. Ships that could phase between dimensions, weapons that learned from combat, shields that turned enemy fire into friendly power. Humans had spent 5 years becoming something the Council never imagined they could be. It was a good thing because the galaxy was going to need them very soon. The first destroyer ship appeared in the Zentara system, like a nightmare made of metal and darkness. Captain Mike Rogers was on patrol duty in his scout vessel when his sensor started screaming warnings that nothing should be able to exist in the same space as the massive alien craft. The ship was geometric and wrong, with angles that hurt to look at and surfaces that seemed to bend light around them like they were eating reality itself. Mike tried to send a warning message to the Galactic Council, but the destroyer ship had already noticed him. A beam of crimson energy reached out and touched his vessel with almost gentle precision. Mike watched his hull plating dissolve into component atoms and felt his life support systems die one by one. He managed to launch a single emergency beacon before his ship became dust floating in the void. The beacon reached Zentara Prime 17 minutes before the destroyer fleet arrived in force. Chancellor Crixhigh was in his private chambers when the alarm signals began echoing through the crystal spires of the capital city. He had ruled the Council for 200 years and had never heard the planetary defense grid make sounds like this before. "Report," he commanded as he rushed into the emergency command center, unknown. "Vessels emerging from hyperspace," replied his aide, a nervous Etherian whose energy patterns flickered with fear. 700 contacts and growing. They're not responding to communication attempts. Crixhigh looked at the tactical display and felt his multiple hearts skip several beats. The enemy ships were larger than anything in the Council fleet. They moved in perfect formation without any visible coordination signals. Worst of all, they were heading straight for populated worlds with no attempt to negotiate or demand surrender. Deploy the defense fleet, Crixhigh ordered. All available vessels to intercept positions. The Council fleet, that had kept peace for 12,000 years, launched from orbital platforms around Zentara Prime. 300 ships representing every major species in the galaxy rose to meet the destroyer armada. Admiral Vorthek of the Vorthek Navy led the attack with confidence built on centuries of military dominance. The battle lasted exactly 43 minutes. The Council ships opened fire with weapons that had pacified rebellions and ended wars for longer than most species had existed. Plasma cannons and gravity torpedoes and quantum disruptors filled space with enough destructive energy to crack planets. The destroyer vessels absorbed every shot like they were drinking sunlight. When the destroyers fired back, entire sections of the Council fleet simply ceased to exist. Their weapons did not explode ships or burn through armor. They erased matter from reality as if it had never been created in the first place. Admiral Vorthek's flagship vanished between one heartbeat and the next, leaving only empty space where the pride of the Vorthek Navy had been. Fall back, Crixhigh transmitted to his surviving ships. All vessels retreat to secondary positions, but there was nowhere to retreat to. The destroyer fleet split into smaller groups and began systematically harvesting every populated world in the system. They did not land troops or demand tribute. They simply covered planets with a strange silver mist that converted all living matter into raw materials for their endless hunger. The emergency broadcasts began flooding Council spaces. System after system reported the same nightmare. The Etherian collective screamed across the psychic networks as their energy-based civilization was consumed by machines specifically designed to feed on consciousness itself. The crystalline hive worlds went silent one by one as the destroyers turned their meditation crystals into component molecules. Sophie Blake received the first desperate message in her small office on the trading station where she had been watching Council politics for 5 years. Her official diplomatic status had been revoked when humanity was expelled, but she had stayed behind as an unofficial observer to maintain some connection between her people and the galaxy they had left behind. The message came from Crixhigh himself, transmitted on emergency frequencies that were supposed to be used only when civilization was ending. Sophie, the Chancellor's voice was broken and afraid. They're dying out here. All of them. Entire species are being erased from existence. Whatever differences we had with your people, we cannot let an entire galaxy burn. Sophie stared at the transmission for a long time before she composed her reply. She thought about Jake Morrison standing in the Council chamber 5 years ago, listening to aliens who believed they were too civilized to need humanity's help. She thought about the 200 human colonies that had been forced to flee into the darkness because the Council was afraid of change and growth and tomorrow. Then she thought about the children on those Council worlds who were about to die because their leaders had been too proud to learn from their mistakes. I'll contact our fleet, Sophie replied. But understand something, Chancellor. We're not coming back to save the Council. We're coming back to save the people the Council failed to protect. The message reached Admiral Kate Harrison on her flagship while she was reviewing reports from the archaeological dig on Kronos. 7. Dr. Maria Santos had made another breakthrough in understanding the ancient technology, but now there was no time to study the implications. The galaxy was dying and humanity was the only force capable of stopping the slaughter. Kate activated the emergency protocols that brought the entire human fleet to maximum alert. 200 ships powered by void crystals and equipped with technology that could reshape reality itself. Vessels that could phase between dimensions and weapons that learned from every battle they fought. All captains to battle stations, Kate transmitted across the fleet network. Operation Homecoming is now active. We're going home to fight for people who threw us away. Captain Ben Murphy received the orders on his reconnaissance vessel and immediately began plotting jump coordinates for the inner galaxy. His ship was one of the new phase-capable designs that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He would scout ahead and gather intelligence on destroyer tactics while the main fleet prepared for war. Admiral, Murphy transmitted back to Kate, are you sure about this? These are the same aliens who said we were too dangerous to live among civilized species. Kate looked at the tactical display showing destroyer fleets spreading through Council space like a plague of metal death. Maybe we are too dangerous, Ben. But right now, dangerous is exactly what the galaxy needs. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace and began the journey back to the civilization that had rejected them. Behind them, the ancient machines on Kronos 7 activated systems that had been dormant for 50,000 years, as if they were welcoming their creators' children home from a very long exile. The Battle of Nexus Station changed everything. Admiral Kate Harrison watched from the bridge of her flagship as human vessels phased through destroyer defenses like ghosts walking through walls. The enemy had expected another easy victory against primitive aliens who fought with outdated weapons and ancient tactics. Instead, they found ships that could exist in multiple dimensions, and weapons that grew stronger with each shot fired at them. Captain Danny Hayes piloted his destroyer through a cloud of destroyer fighters that were trying to surround his vessel. His ship's hull shifted and flowed like liquid metal as enemy fire splashed harmlessly against adaptive armor. When he fired back, his weapons learned from the alien defensive patterns and adjusted their attack frequencies to penetrate shields that had seemed impenetrable moments before. All enemy fighters in Section 7 neutralized, Danny reported over the comm system. Moving to assist the Centauri evacuation fleet, Kate nodded and turned her attention to the main battle. The destroyer mothership was a massive geometric horror that bent space around itself like a black hole made of metal and malice. Council forces had been throwing everything they had at it for 3 days without making a dent in its armor. Human ships approached the problem differently. Phase shift on my mark, Kate commanded. All vessels prepare for dimensional jump. The human fleet vanished from normal space and reappeared inside the destroyer mothership's shield perimeter. They fired point-blank into weak spots that should not have existed, but somehow were perfectly visible to human targeting systems. The massive alien vessel shuddered as explosions bloomed along its hull like deadly flowers. Dr. Elena Martinez was monitoring the battle from her research station when she made the discovery that explained everything. The quantum readings from human weapons matched perfectly with the energy signatures they had found in the ruins on Kronos 7. The ancient technology was not just compatible with human brain patterns by accident. Kate, Elena transmitted on the emergency command frequency. I know why our weapons work so well against them. We're not using alien technology. We're using human technology that's 50,000 years old. The implications hit Kate like a physical blow. Humans were not newcomers to the galaxy. They were the descendants of the species that had built the ruins on Kronos 7. The architects had not vanished mysteriously. They had retreated to the edge of space and allowed themselves to evolve naturally while their ancient enemies slept in the galactic core. That's why the destroyers are here, Elena continued. They were built to hunt the architects. When we started using the old technology again, we triggered their awakening protocols. The battle around Nexus Station reached its climax as human ships coordinated their attacks with supernatural precision. Commander Lisa Wright led a squadron of phase-capable vessels directly through the destroyer mothership's core systems. Her weapons fired bursts of pure creation energy that unmade the enemy vessel from the inside out. When the massive alien ship finally died, it collapsed into itself with a sound like reality screaming. The smaller destroyer vessels stopped moving immediately, as if someone had turned off a switch in their mechanical minds. Across the battlefield, rescued council ships began broadcasting messages of gratitude and amazement. Chancellor Crixhigh arrived at Nexus Station aboard one of the few surviving council vessels. He had come to witness humanity's first major victory, and to understand how the species his government had expelled 5 years ago had become the galaxy's only hope for survival. The human ships that had saved his people looked nothing like the crude vessels he remembered from the old days. Admiral Harrison, Crixhigh said when he met Kate in the station's main conference room, the Council owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. Kate studied the insectoid leader who had voted to exile her species. His multiple eyes showed exhaustion and defeat, but also something that might have been respect. We didn't come back for the Council, Chancellor. We came back for the people the Council failed to protect. What do you want from us? Crixhigh asked. Surely you must have demands, terms for your continued assistance. Kate looked out through the transparent walls at the wreckage of the destroyer fleet floating in space like the bones of metal giants. Human salvage crews were already studying the alien technology to understand how their enemies thought and fought. We want to make sure this never happens again. Over the following weeks, human ships appeared throughout Council space, wherever destroyer fleets threatened populated worlds. They moved with coordination that seemed impossible across such vast distances, as if every human captain could read the minds of their allies. The truth was more remarkable than telepathy. The ancient ruins on Chronos 7 had revealed their deepest secrets to Dr. Maria Santos and her archaeological team. The architects had built a quantum communication network that connected every world they had ever touched. When humans used the old technology, they gained access to a galaxy-spanning information system that had been waiting 50,000 years for its creators to return. President Carol Woods addressed the galaxy from her flagship as human forces completed the liberation of the Vorthak homeworld. Her message was broadcast to every surviving world on emergency frequencies that reached across the spiral arms. "The age of the Council is over," she said. "Not because we destroyed it, but because it destroyed itself through fear of change and growth." The response from surviving worlds was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together under human coordination. The Centauri Federation offered their bioengineering expertise to help rebuild devastated ecosystems. The Aquatic Collective shared their knowledge of deep space navigation. Even the proud Draconian Empire requested human advisors to help reorganize their military. But not everyone welcomed humanity's return to galactic affairs. General Keth Zahn of the surviving Vorthak military had watched his fleets destroyed by enemies his people could not understand, then rescued by aliens his government had considered inferior. The shame burned in his warrior's heart like acid. "They saved us," Keth Zahn told his aide as they watched human ships evacuating Vorthak civilians from a partially destroyed colony world. "But they have made us weak in doing so. A species that cannot defend itself does not deserve to survive." The seeds of future conflict were already growing in the ruins of the old order. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but saving and ruling were very different things. The survivors of the Council remembered when they had been the ones making decisions for lesser species. Some of them were not ready to accept that those days were gone forever. Kate Harrison stood on the observation deck of her flagship and watched human ships working alongside alien vessels to rebuild what the destroyers had broken. The immediate threat was over, but she could see storm clouds gathering on the political horizon. Saving the galaxy had been the easy part. Now came the much harder task of building something better to replace what had been lost. The Great Conference began on Aurora Prime exactly 1 year after the last destroyer ship had been destroyed. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the podium in the center of a crystalline amphitheater that had been grown specifically for this moment. The building rose from the planet's surface like a flower made of living light. Its walls transparent, enough to show the stars beyond but strong enough to hold representatives from 83 different species. Jake looked out at the assembled delegates and felt the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. Energy beings floated next to rock creatures that had traveled from the galactic rim. Aquatic species sat in mobile water tanks beside silicon-based life forms that communicated through vibrations in the chamber floor. The diversity was staggering and beautiful and completely unprecedented in galactic politics. "We're not here to recreate the Council," Jake said, his voice carried to every corner of the amphitheater by translation systems that turned his words into light patterns and chemical signals and pure thought. "The Council failed because it feared change and growth and the unknown. We're here to build something better." The debates that followed were intense and sometimes heated. The Aquatic Collective wanted stronger environmental protections for ocean worlds. The warrior culture of the Draconians demanded the right to settle disputes through individual combat. The philosophical Etherians insisted on provisions for species that existed as pure consciousness, rather than physical matter. Dr. Lisa Park led the human delegation's efforts to find compromises that satisfied everyone's core needs without creating rigid rules that could never be changed. She had learned from studying destroyer technology that the greatest danger came from systems that could not adapt to new circumstances. "Every species here has something unique to offer," Lisa said during the third day of negotiations. "The Centauri understand biological systems better than anyone else in the galaxy. The lithoids can survive in environments that would kill the rest of us instantly. The deep void miners know how to find resources in places where nothing should exist." The breakthrough came when a young Vorthak diplomat named Zexhai proposed the Adaptive Governance Protocol. Instead of creating universal laws that applied to everyone equally, the new Commonwealth would have flexible guidelines that could evolve as member species grew and changed. Core principles of non-aggression, mutual aid, and technological sharing would remain constant. but the specific ways they were implemented could vary by species and situation. A law that works for energy beings might not work for rock creatures, Zexhai explained to the assembly, but the principle behind the law can stay the same. While the application changes to fit different forms of life, Captain Alex Turner addressed the security concerns that several species had raised about creating a government without a strong central military. His solution was elegant and practical. The new Commonwealth fleet would be truly integrated, with ships crewed by multiple species working together. Human phase shift technology would be combined with draconian weapon systems, Centauri bioships, and lithoid defensive screens to create vessels that no single species could build alone. Diversity makes us stronger, Alex said. The destroyers were defeated because they could only think in one way. They had no concept of cooperation or adaptation. We won because we learned from each other and became something greater than the sum of our parts. The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy on every available frequency. As each species representative added their mark to the charter, new possibilities began to unfold. Trade routes that had been impossible under Council restrictions opened immediately. Joint exploration missions began planning voyages into previously forbidden regions of space. Most importantly, the artificial barriers between species started to dissolve. Dr. Elena Martinez watched the ceremony from her laboratory on Kronos 7th, where she was training alien scientists to use architect technology safely. Her students included Vorthak engineers, Etherian theorists, and Centauri biologists who were learning to work together in ways their governments had never allowed. The old rules are gone forever, Elena said to her mixed species research team. Now we get to write new ones together. The transformation was not without its challenges. General Kethzan and his faction of Vorthak hardliners attempted to sabotage several human facilities before they were stopped by their own people. The warrior understood military defeat, but he could not accept the idea that his proud species now needed guidance from aliens who had once been considered primitive newcomers. We have become servants in our own galaxy, Kethzan said during his trial for sabotage. Our ancestors ruled the stars when humans were still crawling in mud on their homeworld. Your ancestors built a system that nearly got everyone killed, replied the Vorthak judge who sentenced him to rehabilitation rather than imprisonment. Maybe it's time to try something different. The real measure of the Commonwealth's success came 5 years later when Commander Sarah Martinez took command of the first truly integrated exploration vessel. Her ship, the Commonwealth Star, carried a crew that included humans, reformed Vorthak, Centauri bioengineers, Etherian navigators, and Draconian tactical specialists. Their mission was to explore beyond the galactic rim and discover what other wonders awaited in the vast universe. Sarah was the daughter of Dr. Elena Martinez and had grown up learning alien languages alongside human mathematics. To her, working with non-human crew members was as natural as breathing. She represented the first generation to grow up in a galaxy where cooperation was not just encouraged, but celebrated. Phase drive ready for activation, reported her Vorthak engineer, a young female named Kethlira who had chosen to honor her, people's future rather than their past. Etherian navigation systems show clear space ahead, added the ship's consciousness-based pilot. All stations report. Ready for jump, concluded the Draconian weapons officer who hoped they would find friends rather than enemies in the darkness beyond known space. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the edge of the galaxy ahead of them. Beyond those distant stars lay infinite possibilities and unknown adventures. Take us out, she ordered. Let's see what's waiting for us in the great unknown. The Commonwealth Star phased into hyperspace and vanished from the galaxy that humanity had saved and then helped to rebuild. Behind them, children of multiple species played together on worlds throughout the spiral arms. Some were human, some were alien, and some were hybrids that represented entirely new forms of life. President Carol Woods watched the ship's departure from her office on Aurora Prime and smiled. Humanity had been thrown out of the Galactic Council for being too dangerous and too unpredictable. In the end, those same qualities had made them exactly what the galaxy needed to survive and grow and reach for the stars with hope, instead of fear.